And and I was a fan of W.C. Fields, you know, that really rascally sense of humor, you know. How do you like children? Parboiled. You know, he had a real attitude. So you could say Godfrey Daniels, and it almost came out with an attitude of W. And so he would say, Mother of Pearl, or Godfrey Daniels. So it was his way of cursing on screen. So I thought that was appropriate, really, the curse of the South Side. But it sounded pubbish. All these songwriters.
Yeah. And so Jay went back to New York, and he told Rosalie Swirls about us down here at Godfrey's. And she called up straight away and came through. I think the first time she came through, her son Kevin was with her. Am I right about that? But she came through. She was from Idaho and was very interested in the music of the Basque people. And she knew probably every folk song on the face of the earth. Her memory was astounding. And she knew everybody. She was a mother of 5, and she
toured with those kids.
She toured with those kids, and she lived for a number of years at Cafe Lino, which is a folk music coffee house in Saratoga Springs, New York, that is a predecessor to this one. And Rosalie played here many, many, many times, and she was always on the road and always talking to people. And she brought people to us. And she brought Utah Phillips to us. She told Odetta about us, and Odetta, then came and played. And she played here easily 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a year. And she comes most of the time solo, sometimes with a guitar player, Bruce Carver. Sometimes with full band, with people like Jay Younger and Winnie Winston, and sometimes with Terry Garthwaite and a poet, what was her name, Ronnie Louise Hawkins, I think, a 3-woman show. Just amazing, amazing woman. And I think for me, some of my most special evenings here were watching her shows, because they were so rich and varied, always different. And we became very, very, very good friends over the years. And for me, that's a big part of Godfrey's, is I developed friendships with all these folks who were coming through town, and carried those friendships for nearly 50 years now, and that's really just amazing. And yeah.
I remember upstairs talking with her in her Billie Holiday phase, where she would explain to me what made Billie Holiday so special and so evocative and emotionally laden with how she sang. And I've never been able to not listen to Rosalie Swirls without hearing what she learned about the phrasing, the sliding in and out, the emotional content of how you sing the words, how you raise up and in and out and shape the music. You know, I'm lucky if I can sing the melody, you know, but what she showed me is how how you can affect it. And so she was very intelligent about it. She was a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
She told some of the most foul jokes on this stage. She told one about having the balls of one of the great bankers, holding the balls of this banker, and she told it in front of him, and it was great. I'll have to find that one and replay that one for you.
Yeah.
But she was a great storyteller. This is called Rock, Salt, and Nails. On the banks of the river, where the willows hang low, and the wild birds all warble with a low moaning sound, down in the hollow where the waters run cold, it was there I first listened to the lies that you told. Indians that were buried over there, and they thought, well, that kind of helps define what Bethlehem is all about. And he would find the little nooks and crannies, you know, the churches up here on the south side of Bethlehem that are all community-oriented, Croatian, Windish, whatever, that helped define what the south side of Bethlehem was all about. And but he would come in and he'd sit down, how you been? And he would just almost start from where he left a year ago.
Yeah. And when he'd get to town, he'd buy the local newspapers and read them and bring those stories into his evening show. And he was a big wobbly and union guy and stuff, and he talked about that stuff all the time. And it was always interesting to see who would come and see him, because these union folks and wobblies would come in and, you know, have a conversation with him. It was always great. Yeah.
He would give workshops on hoboing, how to catch a ride, you know. And just, yes.
When was the last time Utah Phillips was here?
What's that?
When was the last time Utah Phillips played here?
Do you know Ramona?
No, it's gotta be 20 years.
Wow.
It's in the book.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
an index.
What book?
I early on when I was going to Lehigh, I lived back up in upstate New York, and a friend of mine took me to Cafe Lena for the first time. And I had never been in a folk club before. And I got to see Utah Phillips on his first trip east from the West Coast, and he was foul-mouthed and everything. He was great. I loved it. He matured considerably into an elder statesman, but he was just a raconteur, just great.
It was run by Dave Fry and Cindy Dinsmore, and it immediately felt like home. Walk in the door, there was a smell of cinnamon and nutmeg, hot cider, and weapons-grade coffee. There was a counter on your right as you came in off the street where they served coffee, soups, and home-baked bread, and the kind of pies normally seen only in Norman Rockwell paintings.
Make sure you get yours.
It's probably gone by now. Let's see, the concert room was in the back. It seated about 80. Upstairs was the apartment that Dave and Cindy shared with a couple of cats and a dog, actually. And in the front room, there were some bunk beds for the performers. We had drawn a modest but friendly audience, and it was a nice end to a bumpy couple of days. And he goes on to talk about the liquor laws in Pennsylvania.
Have gone. There was a man from north of here. He could raise his voice and he could raise a beer. And when he left, the music stayed. And that's how legends are made. So every one of his audiences about getting chewed out by Stan Rogers. And he plays that song. He talks about being influenced by people like that. Well, he was going to Moravian at the time and getting a philosophy degree. And he would come over for open mics and plop down his spiral notebook, all tattered and worn, with these brilliant songs in there, and he'd flap it right down and he'd go, well, here's what I've been working on. And everybody at the open mic would go, oh my God. Oh my God, it's great. He started, there was a gentleman that came here from New York City. It's that New York City, Greenwich Village connection. Jack Hardy would come in every once in a while, a phenomenal songwriter, who had a songwriting gathering once a week in the village. So John started going in and hanging out with those folks where they would give prompts, and you had a week to come up with a song, and then they would discuss their songs, and really everybody started to grow tremendously. People like Cliff Everhart, Patty Larkin, Christine Lavin, what's that? Sean Colvin, yeah, right. Various other folks were kind of nurtured by Jack Hardy. And they would come out with an album once a month, Fast Folk.
Fast Folk Music Magazine, yeah.
And so they released that album, and it got played on a lot of folk music stations in Boston, in New York, and around the East Coast. And was thanks to those albums, that John was able to start touring the folk clubs on the East Coast. In fact, I remember he was up in New Hampshire at one of the folk clubs, and there was a full house waiting for him the first time he came into town, thanks to the fast folk movement. Writers, and he started touring the world, and still does. And he talks about Godfrey Daniels every time, and he talks about me and Scrapple at every stop. And people, well, that's the way I'm going to be known. That's the way I'm going to be known. We can point to him to the breadth of what Godfrey's is known as around the world. It's one of the top clubs in the country, top 10 easily. And in spite of that, people here in the Lehigh Valley have no idea. But that's all right. What do you know about you? What do you got to add about you?
Time when John lived in this building, he actually slept on the pallet downstairs. And after the shows, John would, and of course I was living upstairs, John would sit around and play. And oftentimes, after Stan Rogers came out with a songbook, I'm not sure if that was posthumous or if it was while he was still alive. But John would just sit at the front counter and go from page 1 to the end and sing every song. And he'd play the piano late into the night, and I mean, it was just great, just great.
John says on stage, he goes, yeah, I was very grateful to live in the basement at Godfrey's. It was just really nice to have a floor over my head.